So welcome to the Secure Dynamics TechCast. With me, I have two past guests, both repeat guests with me. I have Diana Kelley, who is the former cybersecurity CTO at Microsoft, besides being a number of other things, including the co-founder CTO at Security Curve. And I have Wendy Pfeiffer, who is the current CIO at Nutanix, and also have number of different things to her credit. So I'm going to hand it off to Wendy. Why don't you give a quick intro of yourself and then hand it over to Diana, talk about yourself, and then we can get started.
Sure. Like you said, I'm the CIO at Nutanix. I also sit on the board at Qualys, a publicly traded cybersecurity company, and on the board at SADA Systems. And, you know, I've been in the technology space for 25 to 30 years. I love this space. I love IT and all of the folks in this area. And I'm sure looking forward to speaking with you, Diana. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Wendy. I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you too. And yeah, thank you, Ashwin, for having me. I've been in IT for just over 30 years now. I used to build and manage networks, and I early on built and managed a global network that somebody got into, which got me really, really interested in the security side, because I was like, never again, not on my network. And I just love the work of building resilient and trusted systems. As you mentioned, I recently was at Microsoft for the past 3 years. And right now I'm doing a lot of volunteer work because I feel like it's the time in my career to give back. So I'm sitting on the board of WISIS, the Women in Cybersecurity group, and also the nonprofit Sightline Security.
So today's topic is really focused on diversity and inclusion, particularly in the tech space. So Diana, I know when in one of our many meetings, you mentioned something about an incident that happened years ago with one of your colleagues at a conference, and it still sticks so much in my mind because I think it brought to light what, frankly, men need to go through to really understand what it is to be a minority in a workplace. Can you talk a little bit about that incident and so just for the viewers and listeners can hear?
Yeah, happy to. And I think it sort of touches on something that's very true about most humans. Even if we do have a lot of empathy, sometimes it's very hard to imagine what it's like to experience something unless we experience it. And so what had happened was I was at the Black Hat Conference, and I was going to a meeting of the EWF, which is the Executive Women's Forum. And it was just kind of a meet and greet. And at this, you know, men and women were welcome. But it's an Executive Women's Forum. And so I took my colleague from IBM, Tom, with me. And I said, hey, Tom, do you want to come? And he said, yeah. And we went down, and it turned out that it was all women in that room. Now, he was welcome, and nobody wanted to make him feel unwelcome. It wasn't like everybody turned around and was like, what's the guy doing in here? But we when there was the meet and greet happened, and there were some announcements, and he turned to me and he said, you know, this is really giving me a lot of understanding about what it must be like for women in the IT field. And I'm thinking a lot about what my daughter might be going into in the workforce, because I know it's common for you to be the only woman in the room, but this is the first time I've ever been the only man in the room. And lovely person, great father, you know, thinking about his daughter. It's just, it was that experience. Sometimes when we just live through something, it gets a little bit more deeply in us in terms of understanding.
Yeah, and as you say that, I can almost visualize his feeling, and then how that kind of stays with you as muscle memory for the rest of your life. So, yeah. Wendy, similar experiences for you that you have encountered, or somebody you know has encountered?
Yeah, the Diana's point about empathy is just huge, and it's something that I'm continuously having to learn anyhow. I mean, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, right, the diversity part, you know, making sure that we have diverse viewpoints, whether that's people of different ages, different ethnicities, different socioeconomic backgrounds, you know, genders, et cetera. That's kind of a starting point. The inclusion piece is the piece that is informed by empathy. You know, ensuring that not only are all of those folks in the room, but that everyone in the room feels comfortable. And I remember an incident a long time ago. I worked for a French company, and everyone was very aware I was the only female on the leadership team. And so I was always the only female in the room. And at the time I was pretty young as well. And I remember that we were struggling with a go-to-market challenge, and I had come up with an idea. I put together a presentation, and our CEO was visiting from our U.S. offices from France, and I made this presentation, and you know, sort of all of the I'm going to just say, you know, middle-aged white males around the table listened to my presentation, and they really engaged, and you know, it was such a high. I felt like, yeah, this is it. We're going to be able to do this, and you know, in my presentation, I had assumed that I would be in charge of it. And at the end of it was a great presentation. You know, my only concern is, you know, I mean, you're a young woman, you're likely to you know, probably get pregnant at some point during this, you know, multi-year plan. And then who would lead it in your place? I mean, maybe we should name someone else. Like, he said it out loud. And you know, in the US, we're politically correct. Like, no one would normally say that out loud in the room. Yeah. But you sort of assume that people are thinking that. But you know, at the time, at least in France, they were not as politically correct. So you could see the subtext, like you could hear the subtext, you know, just right out loud. And I think no matter who you are, when you're sitting in that room, whether you're a person of color or you're a different age or differently abled or whatever it is, sitting in that room, you know, you are feeling and hearing that subtext, unless a truly inclusive environment has been built, one where it's interesting to explore our differences, and we're genuinely interested in differing viewpoints, you know, like spicing the stew.
Wow. So I need to tell you my own 2 cents, and this was a revelation to me. So I had a meeting set up with a venture capitalist. There was a male and a female in the meeting invite. And then at the 11th hour, I get an email from the admin saying, the male named Mr. So-and-so cannot make it. Mm-hmm. And my immediate reaction was, why am I talking to his assistant? I did not cancel the meeting. I took the meeting. She was a full-fledged partner of the VC firm, right? So for me, it was like, this was bias, right? Conscious, unconscious, I don't give a shit, right? This was deep rooted in my brain. So from that point on, for me, it was like, you know what, this is bad, right? I mean, why is this so deep rooted? And why did I assume for a fact that he was the partner and she was the assistant? Well, it could have been the other way around and should be the other way around, right? So for me, I think those light bulb moments, again, going back is so I have to not associate names and genders with titles, right?
You know, there's actually, this bleeds over into how we implement technology as well. If you think about, you know, the people who are creating technology, but particularly modern technologies like machine learning and AI, they tend to be, you know, a male, you know, skew young group of folks in a few population centers, from just a handful of ethnicities. And you know, the machine is a reflection of its creator. Our culture is a reflection of those who create it. And so this isn't just a mental battle, it's actually a battle that's playing out in the technology space as well.
Very, very true. So, Diana, I'm going back to, I have 7 sentences describing what you have done and what you're going to be doing in the future, right? So how do you, and this is more than just Diana, I mean, you are a role model for women and people of, in the minorities, people who want to break the glass ceiling looking to you. So talk a little bit about how that pressure of needing to show, hey, because Diana can do this, 10,000 other Dianas should be able to do this as well, right? So how does that play into how you operate your daily life?
Wow, it's interesting. I'd never thought of it as pressure. But I think it really comes from just being very authentic and focusing on what is important to you, and having, you know, looking back inside for, you know, is this the right thing to be doing at this time? I actually didn't notice a lot of those times that I was in the meetings where I was the only woman and I was a younger woman and I was presenting very technical topics that sometimes people were like, what's she doing there, talking about it. But I just really kept to, look, I need to know my stuff. I need to show up. I need to talk about it. And if they've got a problem with me, that's kind of their thing. You know, RuPaul says this, but you know, what you think of me is none of my business. which, it goes so far, right? Because it matters that somebody listens and respects. But if you're going to think, why is a woman doing this, especially years ago when I started, then that kind of tells you a lot about the person who's making that assumption. So as far as just, if I am a role model, I feel honored to be a role model, but really what I just try and do is I'm very passionate about security and about securing data, because I know that people need to use technology to enhance their lives. We have to protect it and secure it. So that's what drives me, and it continues to drive me. And I just try and be as honest and authentic as possible. And if that inspires people, that makes me so happy, because to know if somebody does get inspired just by an act of good or kindness or an accomplishment, then that's wonderful, because I know people need to have role models that they looked up to, and if I am that for somebody, that's fantastic.
Oh, you are. There's no question about that. You mean a role model for me. So Wendy, I'm going to put you on the spot over here, right? You mentioned something in your prior employer and making that statement, which sounds jarring, but like you said, there's an undercurrent of that in every culture, right? So what do you tell a woman? What do you tell a person of color? What do you tell a minority, saying, do they have to work 2 times as hard, 3 times as hard to get over that bias? Is that even fair? So it's one thing to look at you now and say, hey, I want to be who Wendy is today, but then the journey that Wendy has gone through is something that's very personal to you. So what do you tell somebody today in her, I don't know, maybe early 20s, or a person of color, an immigrant, like how and why should they work 3 times as hard to get to where you are today?
Well, I think sometimes we're stuck inside our own heads and behind our own filters too. Look, ultimately, any great success or any great achievement requires great effort.
Yep.
And so you have to have that inner fire. You have to have that inner drive. Lots of unfair things happen. For sure, all the things our moms and dads taught us are true. Life isn't fair. But ultimately, my philosophy is, if you just keep showing up every day, eventually they have to give it to you. If you just don't go away, if you just don't stop, and ultimately, then it helps to be in a profession, in a part of business or technology where you can't stop showing up, where you have a passion for it. And I like to say, in order to use your own strength and your own power to kind of get you through that, because you need to have a lot of energy to keep showing up every day in the face of all kinds of challenges. It's okay to be your authentic self, like Diana said. Just because I'm female doesn't mean I have to be nurturing and soft and feminine. And look, I may use too many words for males, but there's plenty of words for females. We understand it. And you don't have to be good, you don't have to be virtuous, you don't have to be someone else's idea of feminine in order to be a role model. You just have to bring your energy and your authentic self and be open to feedback. And ultimately, it really is true. It may take a while, but if you are never stopping in your quest to make that destination, then you'll reach it. And by the way, if you don't know the end destination, but at least you know the waypoint along the way, then go for that. It took me 9 years to get my bachelor's degree. Because I kept changing my major and didn't know what I wanted to do. And, hey, look at me, I'm in the C-suite and on boards of directors. So it didn't turn out that badly, but do I recommend that? No, I want my kids to, go through school, get the 4-year degree. Look, everybody has their different path. What shapes us is partly circumstances, but more importantly, it's that character that we have and that drive that we have.
Got it. Go ahead, Anna.
I would just add to that. I completely agree with Wendy saying, keep getting up the next morning. You're going to get knocked down. There are going to be circumstances that knock you down. And one thing that can help you get up, in addition to your own drive, is making sure that while there are going to be some circumstances and there are some nasty people in the world, make sure that you also have those good, healthy, supportive people around you. Because sometimes when it feels like you can't get up, some good friends are really going to be what'll help you get up.
Oh, amen to that. Amen to that. Absolutely. Totally agree. Yeah. And by the way, we have to be those friends too, right? There are others coming along beside us and behind us who from time to time just need our strength and our perspective.
Great. So one final lightning round question to both of you. I'll start with you, Wendy, is what is the one thing technology companies can do more than they're doing right now to actually foster diversity, not just say, hey, I need to have a woman on the board, and so versus just for compliance reasons, like inherently, what would they need to do so that it becomes part of the culture? I know it's a loaded question, but what is the one thing that you think can actually start making this shift happen across the entire organization?
We need to completely rewrite our job descriptions to create more roles that are multifaceted and therefore more interesting and sustainable for women. Women love to do technology work, but we like to do other work alongside it, like product marketing and program management and sales enablement and so on. So create multifaceted roles, and you'll find that we are interested in technology career paths and that those paths have longevity for us.
Great thing. I never thought of that. Diana.
Yeah, I love what Wendy said. And another thing in the job description as you're rewriting it is to remember that there's some really strong research that women won't apply for jobs unless they have about 90% of the requirements. And men will apply at around the 50% mark.
Right.
So yeah, think about that as you're doing the job recs too. And then the other thing is don't just say it, live it. And so by that, put it on people's priorities. When you're going and you're being assessed at the 6-month mark or at the end of the year, that your manager is actually talking to you about what you've done for diversity and inclusion within the organization. That makes it very actionable and not just we think we should do it. And then measure yourself too. Look at how the company itself, if they start measuring against what their targets are for diversity and inclusion, you can be pretty eye-opening.
Excellent. I always thought this is going to be an eye-opening conversation for me, and the perspectives you bring, I think, are so real, and you've obviously lived it, but you're also giving back. So I applaud both of you for doing what you're doing, and looking forward to future conversations.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.